the fighting spirit of people of Goa, because 62 years ago, there was this liberty. And independence is not from independence rule. Independence is also for the language. Of course, everybody wants to be as famous as José Saramago of Portuguese, or Mineles, kind of poet from Brazil, writing in Portuguese. But then we should also have our own celebrities, our own writers who are also respected worldwide. People like Damodar Mauzo, whose stories we have translated into Maithili. And also scholars like Milind Malshe, Rocky Miranda, who have been doing excellent work on Konkani. So I think the beginning with the Azuno styles was very nice, very symbolic. And the peacock must fly as high as possible. If you look at this talk today, I'm not going into formalities. I hope you don't mind naming everybody who's invited me, because we have very many people who have been responsible for me to motivate to come here. Because I thought in 1987, when I was creating the Center for Applied Linguistics and Translation Studies in the University of Hyderabad, it was a very important year for Konkani, 1987, as you know. I had some bit of responsibility in making this draft document of cabinet possible, even at that time, although I was in the University of Hyderabad then, creating this. In the next set of languages which went into 8th schedule, of course all the documents, the entire document was written by me, but in this case, Konkani's case, I was party to that modification suggestion at Sahitya Academy level. So for me, translation is very crucial, and I believe as a translation theoretician that there is nothing that you do, even by way of creative writing, where you don't translate. You are, even as a creative writer, you're always translating yourself, because what happens on the paper or on the screen, whichever kind of mode that you're writing, using for the writing, is not something which you thought about in the mind. Your brain thinks in one particular manner, and your paper shows a lie, completely untrue thing, reflection of what you've been thinking. That's important. And if you say that, sir, if it is lie, how can it be great? Well, I think the human language, the most important point of human language is prevarication, telling lies. If you can't tell lies, then where can our fiction come from? Where can our cinema come from? Where can our songs come from? Where can our love songs come from? You can't. So telling lies is very important. Now this is very more important during this time of the year. Because beginning of the year. Now, translation practices, philosophical exploration. Can we go to the next slide, please? If you look at this, what happens is, when we look at this text, before we translate, how do we begin looking at the text? We have to unravel the mystery, the intricacy that's available in the text, and a purely mechanical machine approach will not help us. Because machine approach will transfer this word by word, lexis by lexis. Whereas our hope is that we want to make sense of the text for the readers in the target language. And the translation has always shown that it is an art and science at the same time. It is not purely scientific, it's not purely artistic. There has to be some kind of a balance between the two. And it depends on how you position yourself. A lot of good translators are themselves very good creative writers in the target language. And that's, I think, is very crucial, that if you are not available for creative writing in your own target language, then you don't know how to resolve some of those critical junctures at that point of time. So how do we practice translation? Now, the symbol here is that you need to see through the meaning of the text. It's very important there. And the translator's skill and experience will be important, but more important is, do we understand the text? And if we understand the text, how do we understand that text? Your understanding and my understanding are going to be different. So your translation and my translation accordingly will be different. Now you might ask me, sir, if suppose two great translators translate the same text in two different ways, which one should we take it as authentic translation? Very interesting question, because Ijaz Ahmed had an experiment done with Ghalib. As you know, Ghalib kindles the imaginations of anybody who writes poetry anywhere else. So what he did was, he took up all these texts of Ghalib, about 50 poems, and first rendered them into plain English, word by word, and then rendered them into kind of prosaic translation of that text, and sent them to 25 top poets of US. So we had William Mervyn, we had Thomas Fitzsimmons, we had Adrian Rich. All of them received the same set of transliterated, mediated, intermediated text of Ghalib. So you have a text like Ishrat-e Qatra hai, darya mein fana ho jana. So if you have that, then just word by word and overall translation had reached them. But then what happened was, each of these great poets approached the same text indifferently. So when Adrian Rich translated them with metrics, William Mervyn did it completely free verse style. So Thomas Fitzsimmons went in a third different way. So same poem of Ghalib, and what happened is they were never told who is the other translator translating the same text. So then they were all brought to Chicago to meet each other and read each other's translation version. And as they read those versions, it transpired that each one of them is a great translation. So it's very difficult to say that that if there are different versions of the same translation or same text, they may not be as good. So machine will not do that. Machine will not give you so many different versions of this text. Machine will try to reach a unique solution. So that is the difference between human translation and machine translation practices. Human translation practices are interesting because of this diversity. Machine translation practice is interesting because it can resolve text translation with flip second hundreds of pages. So they are different purposes altogether. They are not compatible. One is not replaceable by the other. Let us understand that. A lot of people think that, okay, we are going to lose our job as translators. Now machines have come. No, machines will not take over running the country. There will be need for somebody like Narendra Modi to run the country. It's very important. It's not going to be a mechanical situation. So that's very important. Let's understand that. So human translators are essential for the nuanced translations. So how do you go to the next slide now? Right, Aaron? Oh, right there. Okay. So you have to have a feeling of an urge to translate. A text must really lighten up a lamp in your mind. Why we needed a lamp to be lit here? We needed a lamp to be lit here because that's the beginning, inviting all of you to have an imagination lit up. It's very important there that you remember that you have to have an urge to translate. A text should be such that you feel like translating. You feel that there is a lack of that text in my language. So how can I take this text to my language, which is so very nice, because I understand Portuguese and I understand Konkani. So for me, it is okay if I read original in Portuguese, but I want my people to understand in Konkani. So how do we do that? So that's important, that urge is very important. Now, it's important because also it's a cultural bridge. It bridges the two cultures. Translators serve as the ambassadors of, or engineers, I would say, of making that bridge. This is very important for them to make the bridge, connect people across linguistic boundaries, facilitate communication, facilitate understanding. Secondly, there is also another important purpose that you are preserving the culture, preserving the language and literature. Quite often, particularly when Levi-Strauss or such other anthropologists had been doing their own surveys of smaller languages, their texts, and bringing them into the mainstream European languages, purpose was that something which is available in Hopitewa, something which is available in Quechua, must be available also in English or French or German or Portuguese, because that's very crucial. That you are preserving literature, preserving great piece of writing, might have originated in a very small language, but the thought is not small, thought is great. That thought is just human, it's a property of human being that needs to be retold in some ways. Third is the artistic expression. Now, why do we actually want to know how did Udaya Shankar dance? How did a particular famous dancer, Sonal Mansingh, dance? When there is no more possibility of seeing them on screen, on stage, face to face. We want to know because the same Kuchipudi, same Bharatanatyam, and the same Kathak, they can actually be performed very differently in this particular manner, and therefore that artistic expression would be very crucial. Now, I think some of these points that I've mentioned here are crucial because of that reason. That you have actually interesting ways of expressing yourself, which will not simply follow a grammar of a fixed pattern. The pattern may actually vary from one text to the other text, but the different pattern that you have must actually bring up your own total final result of the text that you come up with as something which is very crucial. So the beginning when I said that different people can translate the same text differently, the meaning that I wanted to convey is that these people who are actually writing in these different texts, they need to understand that these different texts are to be published in different way. Let me bring out my thing. Okay, so the other motivations are, this is educationally important. There is an advocacy for diversity, and there's an impact on readers. So what I did in the next slide is that I prepared a catalogue of philosophical questions. What are those philosophical questions that we can try and relate to translation studies? One is, we are generating texts, all right, but are these texts going to regulate our lives? Yes and no. Yes, how? Because when we are actually translating the certain ritualistic texts or certain texts of Jainism, Buddhism into our languages, and we are Jains and we are Buddhists, then they regulate your lives. So some texts are of that kind. Then law and administration will say that they do regulate our life. We also know that when we regulate our texts or translate our texts and propagate them through social media, they are very important because they may have very strong influence. Translation of a particular few lines of a particular poet, few lines, just 5 lines, so that many of you may be aware of Insta poetry. If you have read Insta poetry, you must have read Rupi Kaur and some other people, writers then. Those few lines, if they go into another language, they can actually create wonderful imagery. Not only wonderful imagery, they can also kindle your imagination to write like them. Now, creative writers, if you turn back to creative writers and go there and ask them, do you write to regulate our lives? They'll say, no, we don't. We don't care. What we do is we do. You like them, you follow those advice. It's up to you. Don't follow their advice, no problem. That's your life. You lead your life in your own way. Now, other question that can be asked about philosophical question is that, do they actually help us understanding some mysteries of the world? There are many, many unresolved mysteries in the world, in science, in commerce, in technology. We talk about market sentiments. Remember, in the language that you read, Hindi language that you read, Gud Chini Uchli. You know that certain molasses jump, prices jump. No, do you actually understand various mysteries of life through translation? Because many people say the translations or literature, even creative writing, has this purpose of revealing. Revelation is very important. You can reveal things. Now, if you reveal things and that is important, is this revelation possible to help in explaining or interpreting the unresolved problems further? We don't know the answer as yet, but this is definitely an important question. Next slide, please. Now, many of us may think that these questions are not so important. As far as translation studies is concerned, why do we talk about it? But please remember, I have actually bracketed creative writing or literature and translation, all bundled them together. So you can't understand translation theory unless you understand literary theory, creative writing, unless you understand painting, unless you understand sculpting or music, scoring music. All of them are quite related to each other. So like Natya Shastra, which is giving you a theory of dance and drama and hand movements and gestures and sculpting and painting and creative writing all together, there's an integrated view that I'm trying to propose here. So, to extend that philosophical question further, what is the relationship between mind, matter, and material? How will my mind work when the text is not mine? It is not a product of my mind. Somebody else's mind has produced that text. I need to bring it to my language. How does it work? This is very crucial. So we have our own consciousness, we have our own intelligence. Do we need to have some kind of a control as we are translating? Or there is completely set free? It cannot be completely set free. It cannot be completely controlled. So where are we? So we are actually in a very interesting position here. And as I said at the end, translation studies and creative writing, their relationship is something which is very important. The cognitive process, if you look at it in trying to understand the text and translation, one is perception is very important. Now, we have a lot of inputs coming in to our mind when we are reading the text. I read the text, and suddenly a few lines from some writer remotely located in past, you remember that there is some music which is playing there at the back. So this is important. I don't know, those of you who have seen Satyajit Ray films, many of you may have seen his films, particularly his famous film Charulata. An opening scene that this lady is walking through the house, beautifully decorated, well-stuffed house, which has so many ventilators, so many windows. Just imagine the windows. Look at the windows. She will just pull the wooden string and some part of the road will be seen. Then she will go to the other window, wooden string, another part of the thing will be seen. She keeps on doing, and as she walking from one window to the other, she's holding the Bankim Rachanavali, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's collected works, in her hand, and she's swinging them. And she's singing, Bankim, Bankim. And she's swinging, going to the window, opening it, and seeing somebody who's selling things, selling various produces, coming to the house. Another scene, seeing some people very busybody walking on the street. What is happening? Text is not a solitary single layer thing. As you are reading a text for translation, there will be a lot of music, lot of magic, lot of remembrance, lot of memory, lot of similarity, which will all be playing together. So cognition is very crucial here. As you are actually writing, then creativity and expression. Choosing the appropriate word, of course, is very crucial. You need to maintain the tone, capture the artistic elements or ideas. So your linguistic competence definitely is crucial. And your cultural awareness is also crucial. Next slide, please. Now, what are the factors and constraints here? What is the medium and tool? What medium are you using? It's like this. A certain raga and ragini, if you want to play on guitar, not going to be the same result compared to trying to play the same thing in veena or in sitar. There will be some differences. There are great guitar players who do wonderful job in rendering classical ragas and raginis in guitar, but yet there is a limitation of the medium. That limitation will not allow you to go beyond that. So that's one important thing. That tool that you select is very important here. The medium that you select is very important here. Now, many of us are aware of Roget's thesaurus. The idea came to a scientist, not to a linguist, right? To cut up the entire universe into certain meaningful, imaginary spaces. And he did that. And with that, space is further divided into subspaces, subspaces. That's how Roget's thesaurus was built. Idea was that I have a word for which I'm looking for meaning. That's a typical way of looking at dictionary. No, my problem is I have an idea, I'm looking for a word. So I'm getting an idea from reading a text, but I'm looking for the appropriate word in my language. That is not going to be easy. So that's the opposite of dictionary making. Thesaurus. So look at this tool. Now if this tool was not there, then a lot of writing, translating would have been very difficult, very different. And this is something which is crucial. In Maithili, we had somebody called Govind Jha who lived up to 101 years and he passed away last year. Govind Jha was son of a very famous lexicographer, himself a good creative writer for which he got the Sahitya Academy Award, but more importantly, he was a good grammarian and a lexicographer. He created a Kalyani Kosh. The Kalyani Kosh is a mix of dictionary and thesaurus. You can actually do that. So you can have a combined dictionary and thesaurus and create a tool. What I'm now saying is inviting you young people to create such tools for Konkani. What I'm saying is that's very crucial. Forget about my speech here today. Forget about this conference. But what is your agenda in the next 30 years? Now you had this recognition of your language for 36 years, but then what more can you do now for your language? This is very crucial. Don't wait for Marathi to invent this. Because this is always the case. You're looking at that side. Don't look at that side toward Pune and Nagpur and Bombay. You look at yourself and come up with something which others will be envious about. So think about such dictionaries, and which will be having a mix of rendering tools and so on. Of course, availability of resource will decide how good your translation will be. And there are some psychological factors which are also important, that you have to be emotionally married to the text. If you are not really married to the text, you can't do anything. If you are doing it only for money, God help you, let finance minister help you, let income tax authorities help you, but you will not be doing justice as a translator. This is important. Then you have to be emotionally married to the text. Then you have to feel that I could have written it if I had that imagination writing in Konkani. That kind of idea you should have. And don't wait for theories to tell you how to do it. There are translation theories, like for instance, there is a translation theory called the cannibalistic theory of translation. Has anybody heard? Cannibalistic theory of translation. When you devour the text. This is important. So anyway, forget about those theories. There are a lot of ping pong, bing bong theories. Don't worry about them. You go ahead and feel emotionally attached and try and do it yourself, but do it ethically. This is important. The ethics is very important there. Next slide. Now, true beauty, is it objective or subjective? This is a question which is a typical Hegelian question in aesthetics. When you're actually thinking about the aesthetics of what you're actually doing there. What the questions I have raised, a lot of you can tell me, sir, what you are saying is nothing new. Hey, we could have also said that. This is very deceptively simple, these questions. But they have far-reaching implications. Or they could also be complicated from the beginning. Some questions are challenging for the trained theory makers also. It's not that easy. If you look at all the later generation translation theoreticians, a lot of people have dabbled into creating or building, arguing about translation theory, and they've all handled all these questions. So these are catalogs of important questions, but believe me, as you invited me here, it was a great thing, great feeling, great fun to even think of these questions. I was just trying to raise these questions to find out how do my people in this part of the world react to them. Next slide. There is a liberty question and a freedom question. How much of liberty can you take with original text? A lot of people will tell you, no, you are translating a great text like Kabir Das. How can you take liberty? Try and tell that to Tulsi Das, that this is a Valmiki text, don't take liberty. Then you don't have Ramcharitmanas. That's an important thing. So, you Pampa Mahabharata, Bendre's translation. If you look at them, tell them, any one of them, that don't take liberty, then they cannot be. Tagore himself, when he was 15-year-old, he translated Kabir Das into Bengali. Wonderful translation. That's a young boy translating. Then it gave him the imagination. Tagore, as you know, is a famous school dropout. We are talking about ADP in education, but let's forget for the time being these big documents. But this man revolted against the schooling system, dropped out of school, and he went and started staying with his elder brother in Ahmedabad. The elder brother was the first ICS officer of India, Satyendra Tagore. Now, when he was staying with him, he had a great library in Ahmedabad of books, and in that library he started reading books which he is not supposed to read. These are erotic poems of the medieval ages, he started reading them at the age of 14. So he will start reading Shringara poetry of Vidyapati. Of course, everybody knows Vidyapati's name from Mithila. So he started reading them, translated Kabir Das, translated some Vedic text, Upanishad, into Bengali. Fine. That translating Upanishad, Kabir Das is following his father's footsteps, Devendranath Tagore, because he was also a person who established the Brahmo Samaj. But reading the erotic poem, reading this, what happened to him? What happened to him is that he started thinking, can I not write like this? Let me try. So he mixed his language, Bengali language, with Maithili language, created a third language called Brajabuli, and started writing new texts following, or let's say echoing or aping or copying or whatever name you can give it, like Vidyapati. So if you look at those songs today, in fact they are the most beautiful songs of the 2,600 songs that Tagore had written and given music to. The best known songs are these, Gahana Kusuma Kunja Maje. If you look at this, you'll go crazy if you look at the dance rendering and singing of those songs. That is 19-year-old. Somebody trying to write like Vidyapati, copying, translating the style into creating a new text. So freedom and liberty questions are very tricky questions. I don't want to go into theoretical discussion of freedom and liberty. But this is the problem with the translator and creative writer. So if we are saying what we write tells truth, then the question is how much true, how harsh that truth can be. Can you mellow it down a bit so that the truth does not feel very harsh? And yet the same thing is told. So translations actually are very interesting, and for me, as a student of humanities, I would say that what does humanities do? As we all know, we study human conditions. We want to study human condition in sociology, in psychology, in social work, in everywhere, so that we want to change the human condition. All the deprivation, all this lack of abilities, all these problems, deformities, disabilities, all of them we want to get up of. For a few moments, like Prakash ji is doing, helping in this purple festival, trying to make them forget that they are disabled, they are differently abled, trying to bring out the best in them in sports and these kind of activities. So it's very crucial that you change the human condition. So translation studies also help you change the human condition. They contribute to your human thought and condition. They help you in creating a good life. And they help you find what is the meaning of your life. Is it meaningful? Am I just there by chance? Yes, you are there by chance. It's an accident that you're there in the world. But then, can you make sense out of that? Next slide. So how can translators help? Now, most human species will disappear one day, we know. We won't be there for long. Our languages are not going to be there for long. They will disappear. And yet, we are never tired of writing a song or telling some beautiful lines. This is very interesting. The translators play a very important role in preservation and documentation of human languages. Now, we are actually right now discovering many technologies and tools which destroy us. Many new weapons of mass destruction, many new ideas that can create health hazards all over the world, many new ideas that can create economic disasters. When USSR was crumbling down to Soviet Union was crumbling down to Russia, I had gone to Russia at that point of time. My eyes could not stop from the tears, because somebody, Ludmila, came from Moscow Radio and she said, I've been working on Indian languages for all my life, and I had saved so much money at the end of my retirement, I wanted to buy a small house in the suburbs of Moscow and live there. But my complete savings had been completely wiped off, and it has become a small amount of money with which I can't even survive. So there are economic disasters. We are actually creating conditions to destroy ourselves. This is the real life story. But in translation, for the translators, can we do something to do course correction? Can we do something which will tell us how to survive, which will give us some kind of feeling that everything is not lost? So that is very crucial, I think. The other issue on the right side you notice is that original and information. What is original? What is originality? Now, a lot of people say that the sanctity of the original cannot be questioned. The sanctity of the original cannot be compromised with while translating. Because the original has all the information that you require. But now, if you go back to the Shannon and Weaver measurement of communication and information, how much of, in any text, how much is given, how much is new? Mathematicians tell us that 85% of what we write is given. Max to max, only 15% of something that we say or write is new. If that is the kind of balance between information and given and new, what is called information and redundancy, this is called theory of redundancy in human language, in mathematics, then what you are actually saying is something which has been said by somebody at some point of time anyway. So if you're making some changes there, it doesn't matter. Now, why is India or Indian languages and translation in India important? I'm almost toward the end of my lecture. I hope you don't mind me spending a few more minutes. India is important because we have always had the license to critique, question. Don't accept anything that I said. Even today, what I'm saying, don't accept everything on face value. Think about it, you write about it, you modify, you question, you challenge, you add something new. So license to question and critique is the paradigm of civil societies. This is very crucial. Democracy, we love democracy so much because of that reason, that this is something which allows us to critique and question. But that is the only way, I think, in a plural society, in a plural space. When there are so many languages, so many ethnicities, so many cultures, then there has to be some kind of democracy. Without that democracy, without that license to question and critique, we can't do anything. And remember the Herculean task that Emperor Ashoka had done. Got the ideas of Buddha, the text of Buddha, the gist of it, translated into so many languages, so many scripts, and put up the edicts. I would say that one of the biggest monuments of translation theory in history is done by Ashokan edicts. And that's all in this part of the world, in South Asia. So this is very crucial, that was something which is important. And it is not surprising that there will be a Shankara coming from down south. There will be a Panini coming from almost towards Afghanistan. Right? There will be Chitrangada who's coming dancing from Manipur. Into the mainstream of India, this is what India has been always like. So therefore, that is very crucial here. We have been always at the forefront of knowledge generation because of this license to question and critique and add to something which is already known. Next slide. Translating ideas. Why and how of art and media. Actually, a lot of people earlier thought that we are part of some larger cosmic order. We are a manifestation of God. But the Renaissance onwards, the idea is that we are defining ourselves. We are declaring ourselves. You have anything to declare? Somebody will say, no, I have nothing to declare, except my brain. So you have this kind of protestation, and you have some kind of idea like that. So, but even there is a problem, because we may have a viewpoint that as subjects, we picture the world as a set of neutral objects. And then we have a measurement theory to measure the neutral objects, good, bad, ugly. You have all those adjectives, you have all those measurements, statistics to tell us. And then we learn what is the way of manipulating these figures. So writers, media people, artists, they all self-define. Historically, this is an accomplishment. But our problem is, we are not only defining neutral objects, we are part of that object. As creative selves, we are also part of that object which we are defining. That's an interesting dichotomy between objectivity and subjectivity. So, when filmmakers, television people, anybody who's doing photography, painting, translating our ideas into visuals or intersemiotic translation, as they say, is something which is interesting. You may think that it's not so important. What he's saying now, okay, what he said so far is okay. What he's saying is not so important. It is important because toward the end of his life, as you know, at the age of 67, 68, Tagore began drawing, designing, painting, right? So between age 68 and 80, he painted 2,600 paintings. But he was not doing that alone. He started experiments of, can we translate poetry into painting? Okay, everybody does that. Then he said, no, can we do the others? So then he got hold of 31 painters, including himself, looked at their paintings and started writing poetry out of painting. So both ways he's going. So I think this is very important, translating our thoughts into visuals, visuals into thoughts. Can you go to the next slide? There are, of course, constraints. This is linguistic relativity principle or Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Now, you can look at the world, like Charulata's case, whatever gulguli you can see by this window, pulling of the window, that seems to be the world for you. But that's not the world. It's something else. So language actually opens up a ventana for you, a window for you to look at the culture. But then cultures also constrain your language. If your culture has a temperature, freezing temperature, then there will be many, many words and expressions which Konkani we cannot have. So in Kashmiri and Konkani will differ in that respect. Next slide. So translators initiate the debate, what is truly real, what is really true? What is the relationship between mind and matter? Between substance and attribute? Between potentiality and actuality? Now, is translation different from creative writing? I'll say no. You may say yes. Let's argue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Singh, for that very insightful and engaging session. The floor is now open for questions. We may not have time for too many, but perhaps we can take a couple. If anyone has any questions, could raise your hand and...
Hi, wonderful to be here. I'm Rajesh Singh. I just had a question regarding translation of scientific and formal documents. You said there's a role for making creativity in translation, but sometimes you would actually need to have very fixed parameters for documents. For example, let's say you have a defense document. One word here and there means loss of lives. What do we do then?
First of all, sir, thank you so much for such an engaging lecture. And actually, you've asked us so many questions that I hope we try to answer them in the next 2 days. My question is, similar to what he asked, that certain documents, like say a defense document or news for that matter, they're so crucial that they shouldn't be mistranslated, or because it may ultimately lead to misinformation. So how much of liberty or how much of freedom can we take there as translators? And if I may, I had another question. Could you just elaborate on the question of difference and similarity between translation and creative writing being same or different?
Okay, any other question? Then I can pick them together and I can answer them together. Anybody else? Yeah?
Not really a question as such, but thanks for mentioning that how you can say similar things but in different ways in the dance, because dance is also considered as a language. The dialects would be say Bharatnatyam, Kathak, Odissi, because people say these are different dance forms, but I would consider them as different dialects of the same language. So instead of people trying to fit dance into these 1 minute reels, there are any dances around here. It's a language that you need to continue learning. So I would like to maybe hear more about what you think about that.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other question? Yeah, please.
In countries or democracies where freedom of expression is shrinking, can translation be a weapon or tool when your own country's literature and other material is translated in other languages of the world across, and that can create pressure from outside for opening out the shrinking space in such countries?
Sure. Anyone else? I think let us begin from the last question first. 1800, a novel is published, first novel is published in modern Indian language, in Bengali, called Raja Pratapaditya Churit. 1801, it is translated into Marathi. You know why these two spaces, cultural spaces, have progressed so much in the modern period is because this is the important thing, reflection, immediate. What's being said there, very crucial. So that is one thing, that is the power of translation. That quite often, in many languages, the moment Khalil Gibran goes, things expand. They no more remain within Islamic, teaching and tutoring. This is very crucial that the translated texts can open up our cultural spaces and can help create absolutely new realities, new movements. Many cultural movements in our languages began with good translated text. The moment important autobiographies by women in Marathi started getting into Hindi, what is the result? Result is Hindi also had tremendous amount of good, the autobiographies by women authors. This is something which is not to be really neglected. This is very important. This kind of relationship is very important. Second is question of dance. Dialects Bharatanatyam and Kathak and Manipuri, they are not dialects of each other. I would rather say that, like Kirana Gharana in classical or Maihar Gharana in classical, rendering the same raga in different gharanas, that is dialectal. But expression systems such as Kathak or Bharatanatyam or Kuchipudi, they are not dialectal in relationship. They're very different. They are like saying the same thing in Bengali and Marathi and Konkani. They're different languages. But so these different dance forms are different languages, I would say. Coming to the third question that she has raised. Two questions that she has raised. One is a question which is a reflection of what Rajesh has said. Another question, let me take up that question first, that is, between writing, creative writing and translation, how do we actually relate? Now, I took great fun, I had great enjoyment in saying that translation is like creative writing. Our creative writers do nothing more than translate themselves. So it depends on which side I am. Actually, I am a translation person, I am a creative writing person. When I am in the group of creative writers, I can beat the translators. When I am in the group of translators, I can actually make fun of creative writing. So it depends how you actually look at it. You are not a single person. You are a plural person. You are a multiple person. You are a mother. You are a wife. You are a lover. You are a friend. You are a colleague. You are so many. So you can't be just one person. You will have to understand that these roles are not interchangeable, but these roles are different. This is very crucial. And how much of truth, how much of untruth relating to the other question is very crucial. When you tell lies to your mother as a child, you know which lies are innocent lies and which lies are dangerous lies. You develop a sense, very crucial. There are certain things which you cannot do, certain translations where you cannot be creative. Where you can be still creative is that what is the technical term? As we all know, there is a commission for scientific and technical terminology in India. And the first dictionary that came up with was 1962 Comprehensive Glossary of Technical Terminology, putting all the science, technology, humanities, social sciences together in one dictionary. If you look at the dictionary, very interesting dictionary. Why? Because the same term you'll find in political science different. Same term in physics is different. Same time in medical science is different. Where is the creativity? Is it not a creativity? It's also creativity. So, in a way, when somebody is speaking, you need to ask this question. Who is speaking, please? Are you a doctor? Medical doctor? Are you a literature person? Depending on what you are, who you are, and what you speak, will be differently interpreted, understood. So there is a scope of creativity even in scientific technical translation. Yes, I know that you make one mistake and a war can be lost or war can be won. Or you can create an act. So it's important. But at the same time, there is some degree of freedom of creativity even at that point of time. So this is very crucial. So what I said is to be understood generally. Yes, Prakashji.
Yeah, just context of what I asked you. In many countries, fields are suppressed. There is suppression for fields. In the similar manner, are attempts taking place anywhere, or this is another line of action where suppression for translation can take place?
No, this I did not answer because the answer is obvious. Yes. Answer is yes, this is important. But as we all know, that many movements also got kindled or initiated or started because of this kind of texts which came to our. And translation need not always be translation of a text. It can also be translation of an idea. It's very crucial. The translation of an idea is as important as translation of a text. Perhaps more important because when you translate an idea into another language, you are restating the idea in a way that somebody reading my language will understand. Because that is very crucial. Anything else? Any other question? I'll be happy to answer questions. Anyway, time is constrained.
Thank you, Professor Singh, and thank you to the audience for engaging in such a fruitful and enriching session, and of course, for taking the time to be here at this inaugural function.